What's up, you guys? It's your girl Bianca B, and welcome back to my channel. If you are new, make sure you guys like, subscribe, and share. Check out my celebrity interviews, past makeup tutorials, and vlogs. So today we are going to be talking about how to live in a big city and my advice I will give to the young girl who is thinking about moving to another state and being fearful, especially if it is a big city. So we're going to get into it. Now, this is my story. Everybody's story is not the same. But I'm gonna share my tips and advice I would give to you guys and things I wish I would have known before moving. So yeah, it's your girl Bianca B. If you wanna know how to move and live in a big city and my advice to you, please continue watching. Now, I lived in, well, I'm originally from Detroit, if you're just following me. I lived in LA for 10 years and I moved to New York for a year. So I'm gonna give some tips and advice that I will share to you guys and what I learned. Ciao. Ciao, ciao, ciao. So I wrote my notes down because y'all know I would be all over the place. Okay. Things I've learned from living in a big city. Take the risk. It will be scary, but take it. I know so many people who say, you know, I want to move to LA, but it's so expensive. I want to move to New York, but it's so expensive. I want to move overseas, but it's so expensive. You're already starting out negative. You're already starting off the experience with a negative vibe. You know what I'm saying? Like, living in a city, we're going to talk about property and money in a second, but you're already going into a negative. So look at it as a new experience, a new opportunity, and at least you tried if you don't succeed in that big city. So I feel as though being from Detroit and moving to LA at such a young age, I was 17, it was like all or nothing for me. Like, I was very risky. I've always been a risk taker. I believe in taking risks because I never want to live in regret and say, dang, I wish I would have took the opportunity, or dang, I should have moved to New York, or dang, I should have moved to Atlanta. I don't want to live in regret. So my biggest advice is take that risk. Okay, the next tip I would give is research before you move. So for me, there was 2 times I didn't do my research on where to live. So when I moved to New York, their contracts are much different than LA contracts. So for example, if you get into an apartment, usually in LA, it's a yearly lease, and then you can go from month to month. New York, the certain lease that I signed was a year-by-year base. So if you move and you renewed your lease, and say for example you got to move out because of COVID, you cannot break your lease unless someone else moves into that unit. So that is a big lesson that I learned when moving to New York, is the leasing agreement and property agreement is much different. So look at your paperwork and do the research before you decide to move. Do the research on your roommates. I remember when I moved to LA, I Googled all my roommates before actually rooming with them. Before college, I looked them up. I looked at their Facebook, their Instagram. I'm a social media stalker, but I did look up the people and just like kind of get their vibe and look at their page and how active they are on their page, what kind of person they are from their tweets. Do your research before you move into a big state and what areas you want to live in. So when I first moved to LA, I lived in Inglewood, Ladera Heights. It was a part of my school campus, so it was a good experience. But like I said, I Googled my roommates. After college, I got into my own place. Like, I did research before moving into that place, and I stayed there for 4 years. Like, it was my first apartment and I loved it. It was affordable. It was $1,000. What better than $1,000? But to some people that may be expensive, but just know, if you live in a big state, we're gonna talk about money, you're gonna spend some money on property. It's just what it is. So it's up to your comfortability. Do you want a roommate or you don't want a roommate? So for me, for example, I grew up the only child, so I'm used to living by myself. I had experienced the roommate thing in college. It was great. I had the same roommate for the 4 years I was there, so it was pretty dope, the person that I roomed with. But Like, I knew that I wanted to live on my own. I just work better that way. Even like creating content like this, you can't do this if you have a roommate. Like, I can't just take over the living room space and have a whole production when I have a roommate, you know? So I feel as though you have to do what you're comfortable with doing when living and moving to a bigger city. So just know that you're gonna spend the bread. I don't know why people get upset, but like in New York, that was the most amount of money I made as my job occupation, and it balanced each other out. So it just really depends on the salary, what your occupation and job is. You really want to do your research before making that big decision, but don't get discouraged. Like LA, there's so many areas in LA. There's so many places you can rent, like a home you can rent. Just do your research and take your time. Don't just up and do it. Make sure you kind of have a plan in order. Living and where you're working is just like two components to move into a bigger city. I know a lot of people just say I'm gonna move to LA and be famous, and that's really not how it works all the time. You have to be logical. I am a big risk taker, like I said, but I'm also a planner. So you just want to make sure you research before you move in. Like I said, I didn't know the leasing agreements. Like, I didn't really look at my lease like how I should have, and that was my fault. So my advice, look at your lease agreement, know what you're signing in all areas of your life so you won't be fucked. How to meet people. Meet people through your job, tell people on Instagram or Facebook, you know, I just moved to a new city, tag people who know. Like when I moved to New York, so many people tagged and I connected with people, same with LA. So just don't be afraid to tell people you moved. Like, try to build a new circle of friends. I know when I moved to LA, it was fresh. When I moved to New York, it was fresh. And I met people along the way, and yeah, just don't be afraid to meet people. Just don't sit in your bubble. The next advice I would give is, if you're moving to a new city, I highly recommend you be single. That's just my advice, unless you are married and you guys decide to move. But I do recommend people be single if they are moving to another city, especially a big city, especially a city like LA. I've seen so many couples break up once they move to LA because there's so many different options. There's so many different ethnicities. There's a culture shock, especially if you're coming from a place like Detroit, North Carolina, like those places, like smaller cities. Be single. It's a great experience. I wish I was single when I was in New York. I was not single, and I don't think I experienced New York at its full capacity while being in a relationship, especially long distance. So that is one of my regrets that I regret, is being in a relationship. So my advice from personal experience, because it is hard, be single, ladies, especially if you don't have no kids and all of that. Be single. Give it 2 years. Okay, give it 2 years. I say a lot of people come to LA for 6 months, say I'm not famous, and move back. Experience. The first year is always hard, especially in LA, because there's traffic, there's tons of people. Same with New York, so many people. Give it a try. Don't just give up because 6 months you didn't become famous or meet celebrities. Give it max a year and a half too. The first year is always hard. I fucking hated LA when I first moved here. I was so adamant to move back that I said this is where I wanted to be, and I've been here for 10 years despite me moving to New York. But I love LA. It's a great city, and I plan to relocate to, like, experience more different cities, because I feel like I've been here for so long. But yes, honey, invite your friends and family to visit your new city so you can feel a little homey. I know in LA a lot of people do Friendsgiving, Friendsgiving, Christmas. In LA it's a lot of people who don't have their family, so they have all these outings and just dope friendship events, so you don't feel lonely on like Christmas or holidays. If you can't go back home, especially during these times. I know a lot of people don't feel comfortable with traveling, but yeah. So LA, you need a car. In New York, you don't need a car. So I just recommend, like, you know, getting something that's used in the beginning if you're starting over. Like, In LA, you definitely need a vehicle, depending on where your job is or where you're living. If they're close to each other and you're near things, then do that. But in New York, you don't need a car, so it's fine, but your rent is higher. So I think every state is different. Every big city is different. Like Atlanta, you definitely need a car. Miami, you may or may not, but you should have a car. So yeah, just do your research. I just highly recommend people do their research and don't give up, and don't be fearful about spending the money to live. It's all about the experience. That's all I can say. It's all about the experience. Experience it, and it's always home. Home gonna always be there, y'all. Like, just take the risk and do it. It's your girl Bianca B. Follow me on Instagram and Twitter at Bianca B. Comment below what city you think about moving to. Any tips you need, DM me on Instagram at Bianca B. Bye, guys.